So here's an interesting story. You see, recently I was watching the wonderful Mario Maker Games Done Quick relay race that took place in 2023. Games Done Quick being the biggest biannual charity event in speedrunning, of course. And during that race, all of a sudden, something really interesting happened. A rather fascinating stage popped up. A stage that would actually cause me sleepless nights. But one thing after the other. So the soon-to-be infamous stage that got played on that fateful day is called Power Struggle and was made by Keynes 2. And let me tell you, Power Struggle is a marvelous achievement of Goombish engineering tech. The stage is so bonkers. Here's the thing, whenever a player grabbed a power-up or took damage at any point during the level, the stage actually reacted to it. Eating a power-up or taking damage by any source somehow flipped the hidden on-off block. Do you understand what scientific marvel we are all just witnessing together? This stage here features continuous, global, reusable damage detection while at the same time globally, continuously and reusably detecting for power-up consumption. This stage is so bonkers. How in all of Bowser's castles are they doing this? That's not a rhetorical question for once, like seriously. How does the stage work? Was naturally the first question that I asked myself. And thus I quickly wanted to look it up only to make a terrifying discovery. No one ever publicly explained how all of this works, or at least I wasn't able to quickly dig up an explanation. And thus I stood there, hypnotized by the level's brilliance, devastated that I didn't understand what was going on. And thus I decided to do the only logical thing possible. I dropped everything I was working on and did nothing but research don't eat power-up contraptions for over a week. I spent hours trying to recreate the effect, uncovered thousands of postings hidden in the deepest depths of the internet. I started to eat nothing but mushrooms for a week, lay awake at night thinking about spikes, dug deep into the inner workings of Mario Maker itself, and worst of all, I even rewatched a bunch of my own old videos. All with a simple goal in mind, to finally understand how 2023's GDQ stage managed to react to power-ups being eaten. And after what felt like a lifetime of studying, I am proud to report that I finally know the answer to the question how Keynes 2 managed to make power-ups lethal during that fateful day during the summer of 23. So in this video, we're going to talk about the mechanics behind power-up detection and how these contraptions historically evolved. We'll take a deep dive into the exact loading logic of Super Mario Maker and we'll discuss the magical properties of violently vibrating thwomps, all with the bigger goal in mind to finally understand how GDQ's power-up detector actually worked. So gentle ladies, gentlemen, and gentle people in general, are you ready? Then let's do this! Alrighty right, so if we truly want to understand how modern high-tech mushroom eating detection contraptions work, we best start by taking a look at the most simple power-up consumption contraption imaginable. And this contraption is of course a physical detector, a physical obstacle in a stage that can only be overcome by small Mario. A simple setup like this already does the trick. Here we simply put a fast conveyor belt below a one tile high gap. The idea is as simple as effective. Mario's only chance to make it past the fast conveyor belt is via running, something that small Mario can easily pull off. Big Mario Boy, however, well, Big Mario Boy doesn't fit the gap and can't proceed. So if Mario succumbed to the delicious fire flower temptation before, he now can't leave the stage anymore. A setup like this is surprisingly effective. Which is really the only nice thing that I can say about detectors like this, because otherwise they're exceptionally lame. A contraption like this might prevent Mario from finishing a level after eating a power-up, but it is completely useless otherwise. Since this setup only blocks Mario physically, we don't really know when he ate a mushroom. We don't get a signal when Mario changes size that we can use otherwise. Luckily, however, we soon got our hands onto the first real power-up detection contraption, because the very first content patch that Nintendo ever released for the very first Mario Maker actually featured an incredibly handy inclusion: progressive power-ups. So check this out. Here our plumber once again finds himself in the middle of an evil castle that Bowser built to tease him with delicious power-ups. And teasing him, the power-ups do. Not only are there tasty upgrades jumping up and down, but Mario is also being chased by a delicious power-up snake. While Mario at first stoically resists the delicious temptations in front of him, he eventually carves, secretly taking a quick bite, which of course immediately turns the floor into shineless effortless yet deadly deactivated on-blocks and drops our poor plumber into the lava. Hooray! So how did we test for changes in Mario's power-up status here? Well, with the amazing power of progressive power-ups, of course. You see, the way progressive power-ups work is that they spawn a normal mushroom if Mario is small, but a fire flower if Mario is big. Mushrooms and fire flowers, however, behave completely differently. Mushrooms famously hectically move around after spawning, playing catch with everyone's favorite plumber, while fire flowers stoically await their destiny, completely mobile and calm. In other words, a progressive power-up spawns something mobile if Mario is small, but something immobile if Mario is big, which allows us to test for Mario's current size. Here the mushroom isn't fast enough to reach the node block before the muncher locks down the path, while the fire flower is fast enough. We can also invert the setup so that it triggers if the mushroom spawns instead of a fire flower, meaning that we test whether Mario took damage before. Like here the movement of the mushroom means that it hits the spring to its right, while the fire flower does not, allowing us to get rid of the floor only if Mario took damage earlier. Damage and power-up consumption contraptions that are built around progressive power-ups are very flexible and a great way to check for Mario's state at a specific point during the level. However, they are terrible for continuous or global state change detection because of a very simple problem. Progressive power-ups spawn into the stage as a mushroom or as a fire flower. Whatever they will be is decided when the power-up spawns. They only ever will tell us Mario's state at the moment they spawn in time. So we can't use them to test globally for Mario's state, because the second they loaded in once, they are loaded for life. Which raises a question, doesn't it? How are we ever supposed to test for status changes globally? Well, that is an excellent question, my dearest clever viewer, and the answer to this question is where all of this slowly gets bonkers. So take a look at this. We are in the original Mario Maker on the Wii U. Mario is standing in between two power block towers. These towers are standing atop two moving platforms. Once we run this little experiment, the two power block towers simply move up and down on the platform. Nothing more and nothing less is what we should observe. But, well, you'll see for yourself. So are you ready to get your mind blown? Well then check this out. Did you notice it? It's incredible, I know. One power block tower just moves up and down without anything happening, while the other tower also moves up and down, but there is a tiny gap in between the power blocks when it is moving downwards. I know, incredibly fascinating. You see, even though these two power block towers are built from the identical items, they do not behave the same. Some of them create a small gap, which is huge. So this gap here is named the Giant Gap, after legendary Mario Maker scientist Giant, who was the first to scientifically describe the phenomenon. And believe it or not, it is one of the most insane things in all of Mario Maker. But one thing after the other. The thing is the following. Power blocks aren't simultaneous. The game can't calculate every power block at the same time. Mario Maker obviously has to calculate how they behave one by one, which raises a question, doesn't it? When is the power block? What is the order in which the power blocks are calculated? And the answer is that power blocks are calculated according to their spawn order. The power blocks that were loaded first get calculated first. Cool, so why does this matter? Well, let's do a quick thought experiment together for a moment. Let's pretend we are actually a power block atop a tau block power that is 2 power blocks high. An empowering idea, I know. This tiny power tower is moving downwards. Finally, let's assume that we are second born, meaning that we are the power block that spawned in last. Cool, let's think through the entire movement calculations that the game now has to do during each frame. So first the power block below us activates and moves down. Then we activate, we now no longer have another power block below us, which means we realize that we have to fall down atop the previous power block. And would you look at this? At the end of the frame, we're forming a perfectly nice tower again. So here's what's important about this little experiment. In this setup, we start the experiment, which is a frame cycle in the game, as a perfectly fine tower. Then, during the calculation of the frame, the tower structure changes while calculating, but at the end of it, we're a perfectly fine tower once again. So we start and end the frame as a power block tower. It's just during the frame calculation that a power block is in air. Awesome. So here's the twist. Let's talk through the exact same sequence again, but let's change the order in which the POWs spawn. Let's say this time we are the firstborn. This time we load in, and would you look at this? Behold the following. Below us is a power block. No need to do anything during this frame. We can safely raise the we are on ground flag and deactivate again. Next up, the power block below us activates. This block soon realizes that it's dropping time and, well, drops down. If we now calculate how the next frame plays out, things become really interesting. You see, this time we start the frame and there is no power block below us. We then drop down, land atop the power block, raise the we are on ground flag and then deactivate. Next up, however, the other block activates. This power now drops down as well, which leaves us floating atop it but believing that we're in contact with ground. So do you see where this is headed? Depending on the spawn order of the power blocks, we either start and end the frame connected to the ground, or we start and end the frame in the air and only believe we are on ground, because we are for a moment during the frame calculation. This is the difference that we can see in behavior between these two power block towers. We simply reverse the spawn order of the power blocks on one side, which means on one tower the lower POWs activate before the ones on the top, while this order on the other tower is reversed. This creates the gap in between the POWs, because depending on the spawn order, the power blocks behave differently during the frame calculation. So there's a lot more to this, and all of this is a bit simplified, but at its core, this is the idea behind the giant gap. And I know what you're thinking. See, if that's all fun and fluff and puff, but why are we chatting about the 2 pixel gap that results from different collision calculations that result from spawn order calculation shenanigans in a video about how GDQ's 2023 level worked? And where are the violently vibrating thwomps that you promised? Well, I'm so glad you're asking, because obviously there is more to this. You see, so far we've only talked about what happens during the frame calculation. But what if we weren't to calculate a frame? What if we were to destroy a frame mid-calculation? What would be the result of that? Well, to find out, we first would have to find a way to actually destroy a frame mid-calculation. And this is where all of this comes full circle, because as it turns out, there are actually 2 ways in Mario Maker to do this. And these 2 ways are either by eating a power-up or by taking damage. You see, whenever Mario takes damage, the game actually freezes for about a second. The same is true whenever we eat a power-up. And this freeze is incredibly interesting. You see, when the game freezes here, it really freezes. Mario Maker just stops the entire current frame calculation during the freeze frame, and once this stutter ends, well, once it ends, the game calculates an entirely new frame. Here's the thing, the freeze frame takes place before the collision calculations, which brings us back to our power blocks. You see, we just established that depending on the spawn order, some objects might start a frame mid-air and only during the frame calculation realize that they're actually in contact with the ground. If this collision calculation doesn't take place, however, then these power blocks believe they are airborne when the next frame starts. And that is actually huge, because grounded objects ignore springs besides them, but airborne objects interact with them. Which means, well, let's just take a look at what it means. Here, we the power up and suddenly the spring activates and pushes the power block away. Yup, this simple setup here allows us to perfectly track damage and power-up consumption by Mario. This here is all that it takes. It is this astonishingly simple. So is this the answer? Is this the solution to the puzzle of how GDQ's sadistic Mario Maker level was torturing the poor racers? Well, unfortunately, not quite yet. So everyone take a deep breath and think of something empowering. You have to be strong for a second, because as it turns out, the giant gap got patched in Super Mario Maker 2. Devastating. I know. Nintendo improved their collision code for the sequel. Trickeries like this are no longer possible in Mario Maker 2. But we were already on the right track. Maybe it is no longer possible to detect freeze frames using the giant gap, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is no longer possible to detect freeze frames at all. And thus, an enthusiastic group of Mario Maker scientists got the experiments rolling once again and started to feed Mario an ungodly amount of mushrooms, only to throw him into spikes afterwards. over and over again. We cartographied the movement of even the smallest objects during freeze frames. We scanned enemies of all sizes, shapes and cuteness levels, looking for tiny, behavioral abnormalities when Mario takes damage. We bounced note blocks, tilted seesaws and juggled Koopalings, searching for a way to detect mushroom consumption once again. And soon, we realized something that was hidden in plain sight all along. Something shaking very violently. Something that actually makes it possible to detect freeze frames once more. Which finally brings us to Thwomp vibrators. So take a look at this contraption. This little contraption here is all that it takes to detect lag frames in Mario Maker 2. So you currently can't see the brilliance behind this contraption the same way I do, literally, because unfortunately this contraption is unfilmable by a capture card. You see, what is actually happening here is that the Thwomp is violently vibrating at a stable 60 Hz frequency, but my capture card and the Nintendo Switch auto capture tool actually capture footage at 30 frames per second. So since the Thwomp vibrates from left to right exactly once per frame, it looks as if it were stationary on the footage, even though I promise you, he's not. So the only way to actually make this visible that I figured out is to film the scene using the slow-mo feature of my phone. So let's swap the footage for a moment and hooray! We got a visible Thwomp vibrator. Why is this Thwomp vibrator so special? Well, because the Thwomp vibrates so fast that it is on the right side and on the left side during each frame. It starts each frame on one position and ends it on the other one, which puts the Thwomp pretty much in a quantum state in which it exists for other objects at both positions in time simultaneously. Awesome. So you probably already know where this is headed. You see, as it turns out, cannons have to decide during each frame where they attach themselves to, since the Thwomp either starts or ends each frame on a position that the cannon can attach to. Both cannons remain connected to it the whole time. However, if we destroy a frame by freezing it, then the Thwomp never completes its shaky movement vibration, which means that the Thwomp is only at one specific point during a frame, not at both. This, however, means that one of the two cannons is suddenly no longer connected to the Thwomp, forcing it to connect to the next best thing that there is. And this happens to be the block in the center, which pushes the cannon towards this block and crushes the thwomp in the process. Unbelievably clever, isn't it? That is all that it takes. So is this finally it? Is this vibrating thwomp how the GDQ level from the beginning of the video worked? Well, no, not quite yet. You see, as amazing as this contraption is, it does not work globally and it can't trigger more than once. This contraption allows us to detect power-up consumption, but only locally and not continuously. We need to find a way to use cannon freeze frame movement in another way so that the contraption doesn't break after activating once, while also staying loaded throughout a level, which is an engineering challenge of historic proportions. Who could ever be capable of coming up with a solution to a problem so tricky and sophisticated? And the answer is of course Gatia. Gatia was the person that solved the problem, obviously. So if you never stumbled over Gatia before, all that you need to know about him is that Gatia relates to Mario Maker the same way that Da Vinci relates to painting. Of course it was him who originally engineered the contraption that was running in the background during the GDQ stage. So gentle ladies, gentlemen, and gentle people in general, you may want to make sure that you are in a safe and well-cushioned environment, because there is a decent chance that the brilliance of what we are about to witness might cause you to faint. The contraption we're about to take a look at is just breathtaking. So are you ready? Well, then grab your smelling salts, because here it is. Unbelievable, I know. This here is all that it takes. This stunningly simple contraption actually, globally, continuously tracks for changes in Mario state. It's just so wow. Here's how it works. Once Mario runs below the large spinies, the spinies throw themselves down in anger, which in turn entraps them in an everlasting loop of bouncing. The cannon atop is connected to this muncher. This muncher stands on top of a winged cloud block on tracks. Because of this little cannon quickly bounces from left to right. This bouncing, however, is perfectly timed in such a way that no angry spiny ever manages to hit one of the on-off blocks on the ground. That is, as long as we never freeze a frame, because if we freeze a frame then a tiny gap pops up. So this might be a bit difficult to see, so you best grab your magnifying glasses. I really hope I somehow managed to visualize this, because for whatever reason, all the coolest Mario Maker contraptions are unobservable. You see, whenever the muncher changes direction, the cannon slightly moves to the left or right. We can see this here. These parts of the cannon are only visible while the cannon is traveling to the right. If the frame freezes, however, the cannon doesn't calculate its full movement calculation for one frame, which means that the cannon is one attachment step behind. That is, until the muncher changes direction. Because once this happens, the lost frame from before normalizes. It normalizes by dropping the small movement that the cannon usually does. In other words, if a power-up was consumed before, the cannon remains in the exact same position during the next cycle, which normalizes the cycle again, but also means that the cannon position is slightly off for one cycle after a freeze frame. And this slight offset is enough to allow one of the spinies to hit the on-off block exactly once. That's it. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's actually surprisingly simple. This contraption is what was running in the background of the GDQ level. This little beauty is all that it takes. So the next time someone asks you how the continuous global power-up consumption detection during 2023's GDQ Mario Maker Relay Race actually worked, now you know the answer. Hooray! Before we wrap this up, just two more things. So first, as always, a tremendous power-up detecting thank you to all my wonderful patrons whose names are currently scrolling by. These wonderful people not only regularly get access to small additional content and little bonus scripts, but their generous support is also the contraption that makes power-up detecting videos like this one possible in the first place. A huge thank you to them for that. Second, now that we got our thwomps heated up and vibrating, let's have some fun with them. We can easily get ourselves a thwomp shaker by just placing a thwomp below a double slope and a random spawn blocked enemy. If we put a blooper above the thwomp now, then we can put everything we ever dreamed of on top. I just now realized that you wonderful people can't see the vibration because of the frame rate. Let me quickly better. So here we got a vibrating Bowser. Groovy. This chain jump is feeling shaky today. Interestingly enough, Mario tends to bug out if we place him on top of a vibrator. If we hit the jump button while Mario is shaking, he always jumps randomly to the left or right using maximum velocity, even if we do not give any directional inputs whatsoever, which is very and makes for an excellent idea for a terrible level. We can even super jump off of a thwomp vibrator, which actually sounds like the perfect closing statement to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and maybe you feel especially shaky today and want to hit the subscribe button as well. Finally, if you truly enjoyed the video and want to show content like this some love, then there is also the option to support me via Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, lots of hugs.